Hi, everybody. So we've got a little bit of time before I get started. We've got quite a few people signed up, so we're just waiting for everybody to join the webinar today. Excellent. I'll give it another 30 seconds and then I'll get started. I can still see participants joining us as I speak. Excellent. Right, I'm going to kick us off. So thank you everybody for joining me today. I'm Lily, the head of customer success here at Constructionline. Now, my goal is to support my team of customer success managers in helping you to achieve your goals and ultimately achieving success. And whilst there are many ways that you can achieve success with us, there are some real basics that really everybody would benefit from putting in place. And so my goal with this webinar is to arm you with some really practical tips that you can put in place straight away once this webinar is over and set you up for success. So as I go through the webinar, you are more than welcome to use the Q&A function in the Zoom toolbar. I've got two of my CSMs, Mike, or customer success managers, Mike and Charlene, with me today, helping to answer some of those questions whilst I go through the webinar. So if you have a burning question, just pop it in the Q&A and they'll answer it. For anyone who wants to know, this webinar will be recorded, so you'll be able to come back and visit anything that you found particularly interesting, and will be available on demand for anyone that isn't able to attend, or if you do want to share it with any colleagues, you'll be able to do so afterwards. So as part of this webinar, I'm going to cover three main areas. I'm going to go through some general housekeeping, things that you should all be doing within your profile. I'm going to go through some tips on getting and staying verified, including number of resources that you have available to help you to do that. And I'll also touch on some of the other membership benefits that you have access to that you may not be aware of. So let's get started with housekeeping. Now, your Constructionline profile is a way for you to sell yourself and your capabilities to a buyer. What you do in your Constructionline profile, or more importantly, what you don't do, is visible to the buyers. So it's really important to get it right, because it may be the reason why they don't reach out to you. And there are a few basic housekeeping items that you absolutely must put in place. These 4 items that I have on the screen are the most important things in your profile. The first one is company overview. The second is areas of operation. Then we have contacts and work categories. So let's look at each of these in turn. Now, looking at your company overview, when a buyer views your profile, one of the very first things that they will see is your company overview or company description. This is a short paragraph explaining who you are and what you do. It's your elevator pitch to the buyer. What they see is the first 4 lines of your overview and can subsequently view more if they wish to do so. So it's really important that you have your elevator pitch in those first 4 lines. Now, if you're interested to see what your company overview currently looks like, if you go into Manage Compliance within your company profile and click on Company Profile, you'll be able to edit this information. Now, remember, Buyers will only see the first 4 lines of your profile. So it's important to make sure that those key items about your business are in those first 4 lines. Now, with the example on the screen, there's obviously a lot more information. As long as the most important stuff is in those first 4 lines, then you're all set. The second thing to make sure that you have in place and that you update are your office locations and areas of operation. Buyers will use this information to determine whether or not to reach out to you for potential new opportunities. And particularly areas of operation is explicitly important for expressions of interest that uses areas of operation to match you to potential opportunities. So if you want to check your office locations and areas of operation, all of these items can be found in the identity section of your profile, which can be found in Manage Compliance. And there are 4 things that you should update when you're there. The first one is your head office. The second is your registered office, so the one that's registered in Companies House. If you have any regional offices or any other offices around the country aside from your head office, you can add the addresses there as well. And then the final one is the areas of operation. So within the areas of operation, despite where your offices may be, you may have a much wider area of operation where you deliver work. Here you can select postcodes, cities, counties, and regions, and you can add as few or as many options under areas of operation as is appropriate. The next thing to make sure that you check, and it's something that a lot of our customers do overlook, is contacts. Now, if you fail to update your contacts, you may miss out on potential opportunities simply because the buyer could be trying to reach out to somebody who's already left your business. And there are 3 places within your account where you can update contacts. The first place is within identity. So within that, there are 3 areas to look at. The first one is the primary contact. So this is really important. Is the primary contact's the person that we speak to. So if we needed to get in touch with you, we would contact the primary contact. The inquiry contact is typically used if a buyer wishes to get in touch with you. Now, they may be the same as the primary contact, that's fine. They may also be a different person. It could be a business development contact, for example. And then you also have your director and partner details, which are part of the identity section. Equally as important are your users. Now, your users are the individuals who have the capability to access your Constructionline account. And you can be very prescriptive and very, very specific about the level of access that you give to different people in your business. So, for example, you can give the person that deals with your compliance access just to manage compliance, whilst your business development contact only has access to marketplace, for example. The third and final area to check and update is the billing contact. Now, within the membership center, you have the ability to add multiple billing contacts. These are the individuals who typically get sent your invoice. So more often than not, it's members of your finance team. They're the people who will receive the invoices, whether you are going through your renewal or whether you're upgrading your account. So it's important to keep them updated because we have had customers who've missed paying their invoice simply because the billing contact was somebody that had already left the business. Now, the fourth and final key area to make sure the update is your work categories. Now, we have over 3,500 different work categories, and it's really important that you check whether the work categories you currently have against your profile match the type of work that you deliver. I would suggest going into your work categories and ask yourself the question, does the work categories that you see on that screen accurately reflect the full range of work that you do? Are there any missing? And are they verified? Now, one thing I always recommend that customers do when they're assessing their work categories is quite simply to write down a list of all the types of work that you do. So if you're a general contractor, write down everything that you do as a general contractor, list everything out. You can download the work category guide that lists out all 3,500 work categories and do a very simple search, a Control F within that document to search for those keywords that you've just written down in that document. By searching the PDF in that way using those keywords, it not only searches for the name of the work category, but also the description itself of the work category. And what you may find are additional work categories that reflect what you do that you hadn't considered because the name is just slightly different from how you would normally describe that particular type of work. And you can add as many work categories as is appropriate for your business. Now, I raised this as a particularly key point because I recently was speaking with a supplier who was a tree surgeon. And I inquired a little further around, is it just tree surgery that they do? And as it turns out, it wasn't just tree surgery. They did all manner of landscaping, and they also maintained street trees as part of their kind of tree surgery work. And what we did when we were searching through the work categories is we actually found that there were both landscaping and street trees and about 2 or 3 other work categories that describe the type of work that they did. Now, the reason why this is important is somebody else, i.e. a buyer, might think to use a very different term than what you would normally use. They might not think of using tree surgery in that example as a descriptor. They might have searched for landscaping instead. So if you have a broader range of work categories, you have a kind of greater chance of being searched by buyers. Now, I've covered the key housekeeping tips. Those 4 items are super important. And now I'm going to move into talking a bit about verification and the tips that I want to share with you around how to get verified and how to stay verified. Now, I completely understand that this process may be tricky for some of you to complete, and some of you may have tried and not been successful so far. And what I wanted to run through today is some tips that we found have really helped others get verified faster and with the least frustration along the way. So the first thing I wanted to touch on is just to describe the verification process itself and how it works. So within the platform, your verification, your profile is structured with what we call sections, under which are requirements, and there may be multiple requirements per section. And then within those requirements, there are multiple questions. Sometimes there's only one question per requirement. When you complete your verification, you can submit everything in one go, or you can submit requirement by requirement. You don't have to wait till you've completed every single question and every single section before you submit it to us. When we assess those the submissions that you put to us, we assess each question individually, but will verify or reject a requirement at requirement level. So in some cases, you may find that you receive a rejection for one of the requirements, maybe because of an answer to a single question. So we always provide feedback to any rejection, so you'll know whether it is a single question and what you need to do to resubmit correctly. Now, we assess most requirements within 48 hours of you submitting them, apart from insurance. So we know that typically insurance policies and documents don't get issued to you until the day they expire. So what we aim to do with anything that includes an insurance policy is do that within 24 hours so that you don't become unverified in that time frame. So we do assess fairly quickly once you have submitted. but you have to have submitted for us to be able to assess. Now, before you get started, before you start answering questions, there are some tips that I want to go through with you, which we've absolutely found have been of benefit to many people who are starting off, or even those of you who maybe are unfamiliar with the process. The first thing I would suggest all of you do is to download the checklist for your membership level. The second thing that I suggest that you will do is actually read that checklist. So that second step is often missed by many people, but it really is important to read that checklist from start to finish, because whilst it doesn't cover every single last question for your particular membership level, what it does do is point out the most important things to note for each of those levels, the more of the challenging questions that you're likely to uncover. Now, you can find the checklist by going to our website. So if you go to the website that's on the top of the screen, you'll be able to download your particular membership level checklist, which you'll see an example of on the left-hand side. And you'll also be able to download a handy guide on how to manage your compliance, also in the same area of our support page. So you'll be able to access a bit more information about about the process itself. Now, once you have the checklist and you've read through it, the first thing that you'll want to do is to check the policy document and documents that you're going to need as part of your submission process. So there's a range of policies that you will need to submit. I do suggest compiling those and putting them into one place. Stick them into a folder on your computer so that they're ready for you to upload when that time comes. You need to make sure that they are all in date and signed by a director. And if you don't have policies, so some of you who may be working for smaller businesses may not have policies in place today. There are plenty of online sources that can give you a starting point for those policies. So, for example, the ICO website has sample data protection policies, the HSE has sample health and safety policies. But if you do a Google search for any of the policies that you may be missing, you'll find samples that you can then adjust to suit your particular business. Now, I really cannot stress this enough. Make sure that all policies and documents are signed by a director and are dated within the last 12 months. This is one of the most common reasons for rejection and is a really straightforward one for you to avoid by just making sure that everything that you do upload as far as evidence and policies are signed by one of your directors. The next thing to make sure that you have access to is your most recent final financial accounts. Now, we've recently introduced a financial AI that will read through your financial accounts once you've uploaded them, and what it will do is it will copy the correct figures into the correct places as far as your financial statements are concerned. And all you would need to do is just double check that it's copied through the correct information. You will need to provide us with your insurance policy documents that include your policy number, things like your public, your employer's liability, your product insurance. All of those, again, will need to be in date and include your policy number. If you don't include your policy number, we won't be able to accept them. So it's important that you upload everything as part of that. Now, the last tip here before you get started is your evidence of training. Now, this is something that I've been advised is quite a common thing that comes up, and something that people miss is providing evidence that you have trained your employees for whatever it is that you need to train them on. And you'll need to provide evidence of that training. So if you don't currently record that information, start now. Start recording and writing down all of the training that you deliver or that you arrange for your employees. And if you're able to find and go back to all the training that you have already provided to them, put it into a document so that you have evidence that you have delivered training for your employees, because there are requirements that need that level of information. It's best to start now if you haven't yet begun your verification process. So all of this is things that you can do before you get started. Now, once you get started and you're about to complete your actual questions, I would always start with identity. It is the easiest part of your profile to complete because it's just simply information about your company, things that you should, in theory, already know about you and your business. What I would then do is systematically work through each section. And as you complete each section, submit them as you go. So once you've completed your identity section, submit that for assessment whilst you move on to your financials. Once you've completed your financials, submit that and move on to your insurances. What that means is that you can be working on the next section whilst the section you've just completed is sat in the queue waiting to be assessed and hopefully verified. It's going to save you time in the long run because you may find you might need to repeat a few sections and just make sure that they're tweaked. And it's better that you don't wait till the very end before you get that feedback around those initial sections. It's just been a little bit of a faster process for the suppliers, particularly those of you who've not done this before. Now, if you are a small or a micro business, there are some of the questions that won't apply to you, and you are allowed to simply answer no to those questions. Now, we can't change the questions because we are given guidelines by Build UK and by the Common Assessment Standards, but they provide guidelines for small and micro businesses that say just because you've answered no to a particular question does not mean that you will be rejected. You may very well be verified at the end of that by answering no. But what that does mean is you need to make sure that you include your employee count, your staff, in the identity section before you continue to complete everything else, because otherwise we won't know that you are a small or a micro business. So that's why it's important to complete your identity section first, because it gives us some of that basic information once you get there. Now, some of you may get stuck. And with some of the more complex questions in that profile, we do have in-app tools that will help you to answer those questions. So there are further guidelines that you can click whilst you're going through that question that might give you further detail of what you may or may not need to provide for that question. What we have found is often with those more challenging questions, the additional info against the question is enough to give you that last little bit of info that you need. Now, if you do get really stuck, we have plenty of other ways to get help. We have videos on our YouTube channel that not only go through guidelines around certain areas of your profile like financials or insurances, but it also, there's information, there's recordings of our existing webinars, which incidentally are also found on our website under Insights. So if you want to go through and watch any of our historical webinars, some of them featuring me, you will be able to see that on our YouTube page. Now, if you're completing your verification for the very first time, what you will see are pop-ups that appear just like this one with useful videos. Now, if you're a little bit trigger happy like I am, I will most likely close that pop-up before I've actually watched the video. Fear not, all of those videos are on that YouTube link. So if you do close one, you can revisit that same video on the YouTube page. And if you are still stuck after you've read the guidelines and the information in app, there is also a live chat button available on pretty much every page of your account. This will reach our support team, who typically respond within 30 seconds. So you're not going to have to wait very long for somebody to be on the other end. And it is a human. We don't have any bots that respond. It is a real human being that you'll be speaking to, and you can ask them whatever you need to ask them about. Whatever you need. So it may not even be about a particular requirement, but they will be available on live chat. If you really are still stuck, it is possible to arrange some dedicated time with a member of my team who can handhold you through the remainder of that process. So if all else fails, please do get in touch with your customer success manager or through support, and we can arrange some dedicated time for you to go through that verification, because we do understand it can be tricky. So I've covered some general housekeeping. I've covered some tips to get verified. I want to finish and close off with some additional membership benefits that you may or may not know is available within your account. So the key thing that I want to highlight is the Constructionline social value question set. So as of about a year ago, we launched the social value questions that don't affect your existing verification, but give you an opportunity to showcase what else you do as a business as far as your social value, because we are finding it's becoming more and more important to buyers to showcase that information as part of tenders, particularly when it comes to public sector. Now, the social value question sets do expire. So it just means that you have to, if you've completed it this time last year, you'll need to go through the questions again, because things may have changed in the last 12 months. So we want to encourage you to review what you put in that question set 12 months ago, if anything has changed, if you're doing anything more as far as your social value. Most of you will likely know already, but just in case you don't, all of our memberships include a claim SSIP as part of the membership. So if you hold SSIP with any other providers, because SSIP is a mutually recognizable scheme, it doesn't matter whether it's us or Charles or Safe Contractor who review that. SSIP acknowledge all of them as being sort of pretty much equal. So if you, as a means of potentially saving some money, you can get both your pre-qualification as far as your Constructionline, but also your acclaim SSIP. Now, a lot of you have attended the Meet the Buyer events this year, and with COVID mostly behind us, we are really back to a regular cadence of events throughout the year. So for those of you unfamiliar with Meet the Buyer, they are our most successful events that we run, and it is your opportunity to meet the buyers that use the Constructionline platform. They will exhibit, for want of a better phrase, at these events, and it's an opportunity for you to network with them, to go and introduce yourself and get to know them, and potentially put your business in front of them. It's an opportunity as well to network with your peers. So some of our events have been, we've had sort of 800 attendants altogether throughout the day. They're typically in football stadiums, actually. Certainly the ones I've attended have mostly been at football stadiums. And we also have a Constructionline stand. So we typically have 2 to 4 customer success managers at the stand who are there doing product demos and supporting you to answer the questions that you may have, either about your profile or about the platform or the schemes or anything that you might throw at us. Now, the quote that we have on the screen actually comes from one of our suppliers. So meeting contractors face to face takes the conversation to another level. You can introduce yourself and your company in a better way. And it's absolutely perfect way of describing what these Meet the Buyer events are. And for those of you who are curious as to who exhibits, this is a sample of some of the buyers that have exhibited this year. We do have one final Meet the Buyer event in Manchester next Thursday on the 17th of November at the Etihad Stadium. So if you are interested and you want to attend one of the Meet the Buyer events, we have one final one for this year. We also have and run individual buyer events. They're called supplier engagement days, and they're typically for individual projects for a particular buyer. And again, we have one remaining supplier engagement day towards the end of November for United Living. So if you want to check out the details of what that supplier engagement day is all about, or the Meet the Buyer event, if you go to our events page on our website, you'll be able to find the details of all of the events. We're also currently securing the venues and the dates for next year's Meet the Buyer events. So hopefully within the next sort of 2 to 3 weeks, we should have those final dates and have them at least ready for you to see when they're going to be next year, so you can kind of plan your calendar for the year. And they are across the country, so we are not just London centric, they are literally all over the country, and we're going to do a lot more next year regionally than we did this year. So I think there's going to be maybe 10 events compared with this year's 8. So let me just take a step back and just go through the key takeaways. So I've covered quite a bit today, so appreciate there's a lot, I've kind of thrown a lot at you all, but I want you to take away a few key items from what I've gone through today. Remember the first 4 things, the key things that you should all update. Once the moment you get off this webinar, go and check those 4 things. Do you have a company overview? And does it effectively describe who you are? Make sure that your areas of operation accurately reflect your areas of operation. Are your contacts up to date and valid? And are your work categories an effective representation of all the work that you do, and are they all verified? If you are doing your verification, start by downloading the checklist for your membership level. When you upload your policies, make sure you sign and date them all. And remember to sign up to the events. They're a great opportunity to network and meet your peers and meet us as well. Thank you very much. I can see there's been quite lots of questions being asked as I've been going through the webinar. Hopefully we're getting through them all. But if you do have any questions that as I've been going through, please pop them in the Q&A. I'm going to ask my marketing team whether there is anything really major that's worth me recapping on or going into a little bit more detail from the Q&A. And if there isn't, it's not a problem.
Yeah, I was just going to say, there's some in there about where to find the work categories, where to update them.
Okay, so if you go into manage compliance, so most of what I've gone through today is found within the manage compliance section, and there will be an area for work categories within manage compliance.
Are you able to also advise what happens if the work category isn't listed?
If it isn't available, do you mean?
Yeah.
So we do have a process for requesting new work categories. So the best thing you can do is to drop an email to support@constructionline.co.uk with the details of the work category that you know is missing. And give us a bit of information. If you can give us a bit of a description. I'm certainly not an expert on every kind of type of construction, and neither are my colleagues. So if you can give us a bit of a description of what that is, what we can do is add that to the list of work categories. We do relatively regularly update the list. So we do get requests fairly often, not all the time, but fairly often. And we will add those work categories to future updates. Is there anything else that's worth me sharing to the whole group?
I don't think generally. A lot of them are very specific to the account, so we can go back to them individually.
Excellent. Some of you may know who your customer success managers are. If you do, feel free to reach out to them. If not, pop an email into the support into success@constructionline.co.uk. That will come through to my team centrally. If you do have specific questions about your profile, we can direct you to your customer success manager, who can support you through any specific questions you might have. So thank you very much for typing that in the chat, success@constructionline.co.uk. I appreciate your time. Hopefully you've been able to take away some practical tips off the back of today's webinar. We will be running more webinars into the future, so keep an eye out on the emails that come from our marketing team. And hopefully I will be at the Meet the Buyer event next week. So if you want to meet me in person, come and find me. I'll most likely be at the stand or doing a similar presentation to this one at the event next week. So I look forward to seeing some of you there. Thank you very much.